To really get a grip on all this, let's use an analogy. Think of our tax system as this huge, sprawling highway. For years, we kind of knew which lanes to stick to, right? But lately, the government's been doing some major road work, adding new lanes, changing the old ones. The whole idea was to make the journey smoother for everyone. But has it worked?
And that's really the big question for all of us, isn't it? I mean, when you sat down to file your taxes this year, did you feel like you were cruising down a clear, open expressway? Or were you kind of stuck in a confusing, chaotic roundabout with way too many signs? That's exactly what we're going to dig into.
Okay, so our first stop is the biggest change for most of us individual taxpayers. They've created this new main route on the tax highway. Let's talk about what they're calling the new default tax regime.
So what is this new default route exactly? Well, in simple terms, it's supposed to be this really straightforward lane with lower tax rates across the board, which, hey, sounds pretty great. But, and this is a big but, there's a trade-off. A lot of those familiar exits and off-ramps, the deductions we all used to take, well, they're closed for business in this lane.
Now, what's really cool about this is how it just lays out the choice we all face. See, on the left, you've got the old way of doing things. Kind of like a route with higher toll prices, but it had plenty of off-ramps, like that super popular Section 80C that could help lower your final bill. Then on the right, you have the new default lane. The tolls are lower, simpler, but you gotta stay on the main road. No more scenic detours for deductions.
But hold on, these changes don't just stop with your salary. The rules of the road for your investments have also been completely redrawn. And this has created some really critical decision points, or, crossroads, for every single person who invests.
Okay, before we go any further, let's do a super quick but really crucial refresher. Capital gains tax. It's basically the government's cut of the profit you make when you sell something like stocks or property. Understanding this is absolutely key because the recent tweaks here are causing some massive ripple effects.
And here's another key term you gotta know: indexation. Just think of it like a special tool that accounts for inflation. It basically adjusts your original purchase price upwards, so the profit you're taxed on looks smaller. It's a huge benefit, especially for long-term investors. But here's the kicker. That tool? It's been taken away for certain debt investments, and that has some serious consequences for how people are saving their money.
So what this all boils down to is this. The new rules have created this huge difference in how profits from stocks are taxed versus how profits from things like bonds are taxed. And whenever you change the rules of the game that much, people are going to change how they play.
In this chart, it shows you exactly what's happening. The tax burden on debt investments has shot up, becoming way higher. So what are people doing? They're moving their money into stocks. Now, here's why that's a little concerning. That might not actually be the right move for their own comfort with risk. The tax rules are basically encouraging more risk, pushing even conservative savers towards investments that can be a lot more volatile.
And this number right here, 12%, this is a big one. This is the long-term capital gains tax rate on listed stocks and equity funds once you cross a certain threshold. A lot of experts are pointing to this exact number as a key reason why investors are feeling a little down, almost like they're being penalized for creating wealth over the long term in the stock market.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit, because all these new lanes and rules on our personal tax highways, they aren't just random. They're actually the direct result of a much bigger, much more complicated game that the government is playing. We're going to shift from our road construction analogy to more of a high-stakes chess match.
Yeah, this analogy just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? Every single decision the finance minister makes, whether it's tweaking a tax rate over here or offering a subsidy over there, it's a strategic move on this massive economic chessboard, and it has consequences that will play out for years and years.
So what are the key pieces on the board we should be watching right now? Well, analysts are looking at 5 critical areas where the government has to make its next moves. First, fueling GDP growth to create jobs. Second, getting a handle on inflation to protect our spending power. Third, maybe tweaking personal tax slabs to make them fairer. Fourth, continuing that big push to simplify all taxes. And fifth, completely rethinking the entire financial framework for long-term stability.
And within this grand strategy, there are some very specific, and let me tell you, very challenging targets. The government is trying to keep GDP growth strong while at the same time trying to wrestle inflation down to a target of 4%. And all of this is happening while they're also continuing that massive, long-term project of making the entire tax code, both direct and indirect, just simpler for everyone. It's a huge balancing act.
Which brings us to the final and most important connection. How does the government's grand chess match connect all the way back to the daily traffic on your personal financial highway?
Well, it's pretty simple, really. It's all connected. The government's strategic chess moves to boost the economy or to control prices, those are the things that end up determining the rules of the road for you and me. Their big policy decisions become the speed limits, the tolls, and the very lanes we all have to drive in on our own tax highway.
And that leaves us with one last kind of provocative thought to chew on. Look, we all want a simpler tax system, right? An easy drive with no confusion. But managing an entire nation's economy is an incredibly complex game. So what's the right balance? That's the challenge for the people making the rules, and it's a question that really does impact every single one of us.